7 cases, 7 young lives, 7 families forever broken. Those moments on Primrose Hill in Milton Keynes, on the streets of Brighton and Sheffield, gave Britain's New Year celebrations a darker story. A reminder that while most of us were counting down to midnight with hope in our hearts, others were counting their final breaths. Harry Pitman never heard the midnight chimes. Jay Fathers never saw the first sunrise of 2021. Bill Henham never made it home from Brighton. Jefferey, Isaiah, Toafeek, all gone. And somewhere in Kenya, Ahmed Mohammed walks free. A killer who escaped justice and lives amongst us still. These weren't gang members. They weren't criminals. They were teenagers, students, sons, brothers, ordinary. Young men whose only crime was being in the wrong place when violence found them. Inside Britain's darkest New Year tragedies, these names now echo louder than any firework ever could. Today, we've lifted the curtain on 7 cases the media moved on from, but the families never will. 7 murders that happened when the nation was distracted by celebration. 7 young men who deserve so much more than the hand they were dealt. To the families of Harry, Jay, Bill, Jefferey, Isaiah, Toafeek, and the victims in Birmingham, we see you, we remember them, and we will never let their stories be forgotten. If this video affected you, hit that like button. Drop a comment below telling us which case impacted you most. Subscribe if you want more real UK crime cases told with the respect they deserve. And this New Year's Eve, when you're watching those fireworks, maybe spare a thought for those who never got to see another one. Because the story you just heard isn't fiction, it's reality, and it's still happening. Rest in peace to all 7 victims. You deserved better. Britain failed you. New Year's Day 2021. While most of Britain was nursing hangovers and making resolutions, an 18-year-old lad from Milton Keynes would never see another sunrise. His name was Jay Fathers, and in the early hours of New Year's morning, a 21-year-old man walked to his door, carrying 2 kitchen knives. This is the story of a senseless murder that shook a community and left a family destroyed. Before we begin, if this case affects you, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us bring more awareness to these tragic stories. Jay Fathers was just 18 years old, an ordinary young man from Stantonbury in Milton Keynes with his whole life ahead of him. As 2020 turned into 2021, Jay was likely hopeful, like all of us were, that the new year would bring better days. He had no idea that someone was already planning to take everything from him. Jay wasn't involved in gang violence. He wasn't a troublemaker. He was simply in the wrong place when evil came knocking. In the early hours of January 1st, 2021, while fireworks still echoed across Britain, 21-year-old Callum Aylett made a decision that would destroy multiple lives forever. He armed himself with 2 kitchen knives, not 1, 2. This wasn't a moment of madness. This was premeditated, calculated, cold-blooded. Aylett traveled to Jay's address in Stantonbury. When he arrived, he didn't hesitate. He attacked Jay with savage brutality, stabbing him at least 5 times. 5 deliberate, vicious strikes, each one intended to kill. Jay fought for his life, but against 2 blades and a determined attacker, he stood no chance. Emergency services rushed to the scene, but it was too late. Jay Fathers was pronounced dead just hours into what should have been a fresh start. Thames Valley Police launched an immediate murder investigation. CCTV footage, witness statements, forensic evidence, it all pointed to one man, Callum Aylett. He was arrested and charged with murder. During the trial, the court heard the horrifying details of Jay's final moments. Prosecutors described the attack as brutal and sustained. There was no self-defense claim that held water, no justification, just senseless violence. Jay's family sat through every moment of that trial, reliving their worst nightmare over and over. They listened as pathologists described their son's injuries. They watched as the man who killed him showed little remorse. Callum Aylett was found guilty of murder. The judge handed down a life sentence with a minimum term of 28 years behind bars. 28 years! Aylett will be nearly 50 years old before he's even considered for parole. But for Jay's family, their sentence is for life. No parole, no second chances. Just an empty chair at every birthday, every Christmas, every New Year. Jay's mum said in her victim impact statement that her world ended that night. She described the unbearable pain of identifying her son's body, of planning a funeral instead of celebrating his future. Milton Keynes came together to mourn Jay. Vigils were held, tributes poured in, but nothing could bring him back. Jay Fathers should be 22 years old today. He should be building a career, maybe starting a family, living his life. Instead, he's a statistic. Another young British life stolen by knife crime. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you been affected by knife crime? Do you think sentencing is tough enough? Let's keep this conversation going. Subscribe for more UK true crime cases. And remember, behind every case is a real family still grieving. Rest in peace, Jay Fathers. You deserved so much more. Jay Fathers, 18 years old, murdered. 1st January 2021, never forgotten. Bill Henham, 24 years old, December 31st, 2019, January 1st, 2020. On a night meant for celebration, in the vibrant coastal city of Brighton, a brutal act of violence unfolded that would shatter a family and leave a nation asking how such cruelty could happen in the heart of a New Year's crowd. As fireworks marked the arrival of 2020, Bill Henham, a university student from Henfield, never made it home. Bill was described by friends and family as kind, gentle, and full of life. Like many young people, he had gone out on New Year's Eve to enjoy the atmosphere of Brighton. The streets were busy, the mood festive, and thousands were welcoming a fresh start. But somewhere amid the celebrations, Bill crossed paths with the wrong people, an encounter that would turn fatal. In the early hours of January 1st, Bill was lured to a disused building on North Street, a location hidden in plain sight among the city's nightlife. What happened inside that building was nothing short of savage. Bill was attacked by 4 men, Duchesne Michael, Gregory Hawley, Lamech Gordon Carew, and Elise Spence. The assault was relentless. He was beaten until he lost consciousness, sustaining more than 60 separate injuries. Medical evidence later revealed the horrifying extent of the violence. Bill suffered a brain hemorrhage, 11 fractured ribs, and catastrophic internal injuries. This was not a single blow or a moment of rage. It was a prolonged and merciless beating. Even after Bill was left unconscious and defenseless, the attack did not end. He was thrown from a balcony into a concrete courtyard below, sealing his fate. Emergency services were called, but the injuries were too severe. Bill Henham died from the trauma inflicted upon him. What should have been the start of a new year became the end of a young man's life, and the beginning of unbearable grief for his family. As investigators examined CCTV footage, witness statements, and forensic evidence, a chilling picture emerged. The 4 attackers had acted together, showing complete disregard for human life. Prosecutors would later argue that Bill was treated with shocking brutality, his vulnerability exploited in a moment of extreme violence. The case sent shockwaves through Brighton and beyond, raising urgent questions about safety during large public celebrations. At trial, the court heard detailed medical testimony outlining the scale of Bill's injuries. Jurors were told that any one of several injuries could have been fatal on its own. The decision to throw him from the balcony was described as callous and inhuman. The defendants attempted to distance themselves from responsibility, but the evidence was overwhelming. All 4 men were convicted for their roles in Bill Henham's murder. The judge described the attack as a sustained and merciless act of extreme violence, emphasizing that Bill posed no threat and had been completely unable to defend himself. Lengthy prison sentences were handed down, reflecting the seriousness of the crime and the devastating loss of life. Outside the courtroom, Bill's family spoke of their heartbreak. They described him as a loving son, a loyal friend, and a young man with his whole future ahead of him. One relative said, "Bill went out to celebrate the new year. He never came back. Our lives will never be the same." The murder of Bill Henham remains a haunting reminder that moments of joy can be shattered by senseless violence. Amid the fireworks and countdowns, when young life was stolen, leaving behind a legacy of grief, unanswered pain, and a family forced to carry the weight of a new year that marked not a beginning, but an irreversible end. Harry Pitman, 16 years old, December 31st, 2023. On a cold winter's night in North London, as thousands gathered to welcome the new year, a sudden act of violence unfolded that would turn celebration into tragedy. At Primrose Hill, one of the city's most popular viewpoints, fireworks lit the sky. But for one family, midnight would mark the moment their lives were changed forever. Harry Pitman was a teenager with his whole future ahead of him. On New Year's Eve, he joined friends on Primrose Hill to watch the annual fireworks display. The atmosphere was crowded but festive. Laughter, music, and the glow of city lights filled the air as the countdown to midnight approached. For Harry and his friends, it was meant to be a moment of excitement and togetherness, a simple celebration of a new year about to begin. At approximately 11:40 p.m., just minutes before the countdown, events took a devastating turn. Amid the crowds on the hill, a confrontation erupted involving Reese Lloyd Hall, an 18-year-old who was 16 at the time. What began as a brief interaction escalated rapidly. In the chaos of the moment, Harry was stabbed, collapsing among the crowd as panic spread across the hill. Emergency services were called immediately, but the scene was already one of confusion and fear. As fireworks continued in the distance, first responders fought to save Harry's life. Despite their efforts, his injuries proved fatal. Harry Pitman died at the scene, his life ending just moments before the arrival of the new year. Witnesses described the horror of realizing what had happened. Families and young people who had come to celebrate were suddenly confronted with the reality of extreme violence in a place associated with peace and joy. What should have been a symbol of hope and renewal became a scene of shock and disbelief. Police launched an urgent investigation, securing the area and gathering witness statements from those who had been nearby. CCTV footage and phone recordings helped identify Reese Lloyd Hall as the suspect. He was arrested shortly after.
Time and a moment, it's 1950, you are under arrest for murder, okay?
And detectives began piecing together the events that led to Harry's death. Prosecutors later argued that the attack was swift, deliberate and completely unprovoked. At trial, the court heard how Harry had posed no threat and had simply been enjoying the night with friends. The jury was told that the violence occurred in front of numerous witnesses, many of them young people. The case highlighted the devastating consequences of knife crime, particularly among teenagers, and the irreversible damage caused by a single moment of violence. Reese Lloyd Hall was convicted of murder. The judge described the killing as senseless and devastating, emphasizing the impact on Harry's family and the wider community. Lloyd Hall was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years, reflecting the seriousness of the crime and the young life that was taken. Outside court, Harry's family spoke of their unimaginable loss. They described him as loving, kind, and full of potential. One statement read, "Harry went out to watch fireworks. He never came home. Our new year will forever be marked by grief." The murder of Harry Pitman stands as a haunting reminder that even moments meant for celebration can be shattered by violence. As the city counted down to midnight, one young life was stolen, leaving behind heartbreak, unanswered questions, and a new year forever defined not by hope, but by loss. Isaiah Usen-satchell, January 1st, 2020. As a new decade began, while many families across the country were waking up to messages of hope and fresh starts, a violent incident in Sheffield would bring New Year's Day to a devastating halt. In the early hours of January 1st, at Norfolk Park, a young university student lost his life, turning celebration into mourning before the year had truly begun. Isaiah Usen-satchell was a student at Leeds Trinity University, known by those close to him as thoughtful, intelligent, and deeply family-oriented. He shared a close bond with his twin sister, and his future was filled with promise. New Year's Eve had passed, and Isaiah was spending time in Sheffield as the city slowly settled after celebrations. No one could have imagined that the first day of 2020 would end his life. Details of the incident emerged as police were called to Norfolk Park following reports of a serious assault. Emergency services arrived to find Isaiah critically injured. Despite immediate medical attention, his condition was grave. He later died from his injuries, sending shockwaves through both Sheffield and the wider student community. News of Isaiah's death spread quickly. For many, the timing made the loss even more difficult to comprehend. While others were sharing resolutions and welcoming a new chapter, Isaiah's family were forced to confront unimaginable grief. The reality that a young man with his entire life ahead of him had been taken on New Year's Day left the community stunned. South Yorkshire police launched a murder investigation within hours. The park area was cordoned off as forensic teams examined the scene, and detectives began piecing together the events that led to Isaiah's death. Officers worked through the night and into the morning, gathering witness statements and reviewing information from the surrounding area. Later that same day, police announced that 3 men from Rotherham had been arrested on suspicion of murder. 2 of the suspects were 18 years old, and the third was aged 20. The arrests, carried out on New Year's Day, marked a rapid development in the investigation and underscored the seriousness of the case. Detectives stated that they were treating the incident with the utmost priority. As the case progressed, prosecutors outlined how Isaiah had been the victim of a violent attack that proved fatal. The court heard about the devastating impact of his death, not only on his immediate family, but also on his twin sister, whose loss was described as particularly profound. The bond they shared made the tragedy even more heartbreaking. Tributes poured in from friends, fellow students, and members of the public. Isaiah was remembered as kind, gentle, and driven, a young man who was focused on his education and his future. Messages described the pain of losing someone so young and questioned. How such violence could occur at a time meant for peace and renewal. Outside court, Isaiah's family spoke of their devastation. They described a son who was deeply loved and a brother whose absence would be felt forever. One statement said, "The new year should have been a fresh start. Instead, it became the day our lives changed forever." The murder of Isaiah Usen-satchell stands as a sobering reminder that violence does not pause for holidays or celebrations. As the world welcomed 2020 with hope, one family began the year with unbearable loss, marking January 1st not as a new beginning, but as the day a bright future was cruelly taken away. Cody Fisher murder, Boxing Day nightclub tragedy. On the night of 26 December 2022, while many across the UK were still wrapped in the warmth of Christmas celebrations, a night of music and dancing in Birmingham turned into a scene of horror. Cody Fisher, a 23-year-old semi-professional footballer, was enjoying a night out with friends at Crane nightclub, a popular venue in the city centre. It was meant to be a carefree Boxing Day celebration. Instead, it became the final moments of his life. As the dance floor pulsed with loud music and flashing lights, violence erupted without warning. In the middle of the crowded nightclub, Cody was suddenly attacked. He was stabbed with a zombie knife, a large, brutal weapon designed to cause maximum harm. Panic spread instantly as clubgoers realized something was terribly wrong. Music stopped. Screams filled the room. People rushed for safety as Cody collapsed on the dance floor, bleeding heavily. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics fought desperately to save him, providing urgent treatment at the scene before rushing him to hospital. Despite their efforts, Cody Fisher was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. A young life, full of promise and potential, was gone in a matter of minutes. Cody was not a troublemaker. He was known as a talented and disciplined footballer who had played for several non-league clubs, including Bromsgrove Sporting. Friends and teammates described him as focused, humble, and passionate about his career. Football was not just a hobby, it was his future. That future was violently taken away on a packed dance floor, surrounded by strangers celebrating Christmas. The murder shocked the nation. How could such a weapon be brought into a nightclub? How could such violence unfold in a place meant for entertainment and safety? Questions poured in as police launched a major investigation. CCTV footage, witness statements, and forensic evidence quickly led officers to identify the suspects involved. 2 men were arrested and later charged in connection with Cody's murder. Prosecutors described the attack as deliberate and targeted, carried out with extreme violence using a knife that should never have been on the streets, let alone inside a nightclub. The court heard how the weapon caused catastrophic injuries, leaving Cody with no chance of survival. Outside court, Cody's family spoke of unimaginable grief. His mother described him as a loving son, with dreams of going further in football. His friends said the dance floor where he fell would forever be haunted by his memory. Tributes flooded in from across the football community, with clubs, players, and fans honoring him with moments of silence and memorials. Cody Fisher's murder became a powerful symbol in the national debate over zombie, knives, and rising youth violence. His case highlighted the devastating consequences of carrying weapons, how one moment of aggression can destroy families, futures, and entire communities. For Cody's loved ones, Boxing Day will never feel the same again. What should have been a night of joy now marks the date their world stopped. His story stands as a heartbreaking reminder that violence does not need a reason, only an opportunity. Jeffery wiafe, 22 years old, December 31st, 2019. On the final afternoon of the year, in a quiet residential area of Milton Keynes, a sudden act of violence unfolded that would cut a young life short before the new year even arrived. While most families were preparing for celebrations and countdowns, events on Caradine Crescent would leave a lasting scar on the community. Jeffery was a 22-year-old young man with his whole future ahead of him. Friends described him as friendly, social, and full of ambition. New Year's Eve was meant to be an ordinary day, hours away from fireworks and celebrations, but for Jeffery, it would become the final day of his life. At approximately 3:30 p.m., emergency services were called to Caradine Crescent following reports of a serious incident. When police and paramedics arrived, they found Jeffery suffering from a stab wound to the chest. The scene was chaotic, with neighbors watching in shock as first responders worked desperately to help him. Jeffery was rushed to Milton Keynes University Hospital in a critical condition. Despite the efforts of medical staff, his injuries were too severe. He later died in hospital, becoming another young life lost to violence. Just hours before the news of his death spread quickly, leaving family, friends, and the wider community struggling to comprehend what had happened. Police immediately launched a murder investigation. Detectives cordoned off the area, conducting house-to-house inquiries and gathering forensic evidence. Caradine Crescent, normally a quiet street, became the focus of intense police activity as officers searched for answers. Investigators worked to establish the events leading up to the stabbing and who was responsible. As the investigation progressed, 4 people were arrested in connection with Jeffery's death, 3 men and 1 woman. The arrests sent shockwaves through the local area, highlighting the seriousness of the incident and the scale of the police response. Officers emphasized that the arrests were part of an ongoing investigation as they worked to piece together the circumstances surrounding the fatal attack. In court proceedings that followed, prosecutors outlined how Jeffery had been fatally wounded during a violent encounter on New Year's Eve. The jury heard medical evidence explaining that the chest wound caused catastrophic internal injuries, leading to his death. The case painted a picture of sudden and devastating violence carried out in broad daylight. The court also heard about the impact Jeffery's death had on those closest to him. Statements described the pain of losing a son, a friend, and a loved one without warning. What made the tragedy even harder to accept was the timing. While others welcomed a new beginning, Jeffery's family faced the start of a year defined by grief. Outside court, tributes were paid to Jeffery wiafe. Flowers were left near the scene, and messages described him as a young man who did not deserve such a violent end. Community members spoke of their sadness and anger, questioning how such violence could take place in their neighborhood. The murder of Jefferey remains a stark reminder of how quickly lives can be changed by a single moment of violence. On a day meant for reflection and anticipation of the future, one life was taken, leaving behind unanswered questions, broken hearts, and a new year forever overshadowed by loss. Toafeek Lamidi, December 31st, 2017. As London prepared to say goodbye to the old year, an act of violence in East London would turn New Year's Eve into a night of fear, confusion, and unanswered questions. In West Ham, while families were making plans and streets slowly filled with anticipation, a brutal incident unfolded that remains unresolved to this day. Toafeek Lamidi was spending the evening in Memorial Avenue, an area familiar to local residents. New Year's Eve is often a time of movement, people traveling, meeting friends, preparing for celebrations, but nothing about that night suggested it would end in tragedy. At 7:37 p.m., emergency services received reports of a serious stabbing, just hours before the city would begin its countdown to midnight. When police and paramedics arrived at the scene, they found Toafeek suffering from critical injuries. He had been fatally stabbed, the wound causing severe trauma. Despite the rapid response of emergency services, Toafeek's injuries were too severe. He was pronounced dead shortly after, his life ending on a night meant for reflection and hope. The scene on Memorial Avenue quickly became the focus of intense police activity. Roads were cordoned off, forensic teams began their work, and residents watched in shock as the reality of what had happened set in. A quiet stretch of West Ham was suddenly transformed into a crime scene, overshadowing the festive atmosphere across the capital. Detectives launched a murder investigation almost immediately. Witnesses were interviewed, CCTV footage was reviewed, and officers worked to trace Toafeek's final movements. Early inquiries identified a suspect, Ahmed Mohammed, a 25-year-old man believed to be responsible for the fatal stabbing. However, as investigators closed in, it became clear the suspect had fled the country. Police later confirmed that Ahmed Mohammed had escaped to Kenya, placing him beyond immediate reach of UK authorities. Despite international efforts and appeals, he has not been returned to face justice. His disappearance turned the case from a murder investigation into a long-running manhunt, leaving Toafeek's family without answers. As the years passed, the case remained officially unsolved. Detectives continued to issue appeals, urging anyone with information to come forward. Each New Year's Eve, the memory of Toafeek Lamidi's death resurfaced, a painful reminder that for some families, the date marked loss rather than celebration. The impact on Toafeek's loved ones has been profound. While others welcome a new year with hope and resolutions, his family are left with grief, frustration, and the haunting reality that the person responsible has never been held accountable. The absence of justice has compounded their pain, turning time into an enemy rather than a healer. Community members in West Ham have also spoken of their unease. The idea that a fatal stabbing could occur so early in the evening, and that the suspect could vanish without consequence, left many questioning safety and accountability. Memorial Avenue became a symbol of a crime frozen in time, unresolved and unfinished. The murder of Toafeek Lamidi remains a chilling reminder that not all stories reach closure. On December 31st, 2017, as London prepared to welcome a new year, one life was taken, and nearly a decade later, justice is still waiting. For Toafeek's family, every new year arrives not with celebration, but with the enduring hope that one day, the truth will finally catch up with the man who ran.